Okay, so I'd heard about, all this talk about expensive RAM, expensive M.2s and SSDs, and I thought everyone was talking about real high-end stuff, DDR5 and 4 terabyte M.2s. But then I said, well, I'm curious to see how has it affected the RAM and the storage products that I use for the EliteDesk and ProDesk. And how is that going to affect particularly the poor folks who are wanting to break into the mini PC and start getting a collection of mini PCs, and all they're seeing out there maybe are very expensive units that have all of the RAM and storage in it, or the bare bones, which are still more expensive than they've been in the last, I would say, year. But then they're like, okay, I've got this unit. I can't do anything with it without RAM or storage. And, what are my options? So I started looking, just kind of curious, of things that I had purchased in the past and how they may have changed. So this here, this is just an 8 gig stick used. I bought it back in November of 2024 for $11. And now this is the lowest I could find, $29. That's almost 3 times the amount as for the price of used RAM. And now in order for that same $11, I might be able to get a 4 gig. I'm even seeing people sell more 2 gig sticks out there. So yeah, it's definitely more expensive. Back in, let's see, January of 2024, I bought 32 gig of memory, 2 16 gig sticks. And I thought it was a little pricey at the time. And at that time, and this was new through Best Buy, was $65. Best Buy now sells the same sticks, and I just realized that it's refurbished memory. So it's not even brand new from their site. If I want brand new, I go over to Newegg, $250. I mean, now we're talking almost 4 times the amount of what I paid for it. If I look for it used, I'm seeing this about $150. So that's, was it 2.5 times? I know a lot of people would be even asking me, like maybe a year and a half ago, hey, can I put 64 gig in my machine? I'm like, well, yeah, I guess you could. Now, 64 gig in your machine, I don't know, we're talking maybe $400 or something to put that much in. So, and then I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just RAM. And, all the companies that make RAM, they're wanting to use all their resources to make, this highfalutin RAM that's used by the AI data centers and so forth. Maybe the SSDs aren't that bad, or even the M.2s aren't that bad. So I looked and I said, well, how about just an SSD? So I bought this PNY 500 gig drive just back in September of 2024, also off of Best Buy, and I paid $36 for it. And now it's going for $100. And this is just SSDs. I mean, we're not even talking M.2s. These are the things that people were like, well, they're kind of, on the way out and so forth. Wow, even that. And when it comes to M.2s, back in June of 23, I bought this brand new 500 gig Western Digital for $36 off of Best Buy. Now on eBay, this is the best price I can find it used at $90. So that's, what is it, 2.5 times also. So across the board, you're seeing an increase in prices, which is strange because you're so used to, when it comes to electronics, things getting cheaper as the years go by. So what I wanted to talk today is about maybe, I don't know, how we can do this. How can we survive this surge? Because it's very possible, the things I'm reading, that we may have this for years to come as far as the cost, until I guess they build more factories or things settle down a little bit, because it's not just the new market. Because what happens, the new market everything, it's hard to find. And then people say, well, I'll go in the used market. And then everyone's buying up the used market. And when it comes to RAM, you really don't, it's not like there's an alternative. If you don't have RAM, your machine's not going to start and work. So let's actually bring up some machines and let's talk about memory and just some basic things of how the EliteDesk uses memory and what are some of our options with that. So here we've got an EliteDesk G4 Mini, and this particular unit, I have two 8 gig sticks, and the reason I've got two is that these units are all set up for dual channel memory, meaning that you're going to get better performance if you have two sticks of the same size as opposed to one stick which is equal to the two together. So as example, if you're going to be buying memory, you're going to have better performance of purchasing two 4 gig sticks as opposed to just one single 8 gig stick. The other thing with dual memory is that you might be tempted to say, well, what if I do an 8 gig and a 4 gig? Well, the problem with the dual channel is it will only do the dual for whatever the two have in common, which means that the first 4 gig will be dual channel, and then that second 4 will just be single. So again, it's probably better to keep them the same speed. I might even go the same type, but that's not a huge deal. But you might have better luck finding 4 gig sticks at a reasonable cost than 8 gig. I was looking the other day, and I think the 4 gig were around maybe $10 a piece. So for around 20, you could get 8 gig of storage, or I should say 8 gig of memory. And that might be enough to, pretty much run a lot of stuff, especially if you're just doing Linux. Windows works fine with 8 gig. So you may not need to go that full bore 16 gig, 32 gig, etc. in order to have something that has the performance that you're looking for. The other thing you may want to think about is sort of combining your resources. So let's say I've got one machine that's got a 4 gig stick, another with a 4 gig stick. I don't know, maybe you're not using both machines. Maybe combine them together, just have that one with 8 gig. What you could do on that is perhaps then install a hypervisor like Proxmox, and then you could have virtual machines running off of it, or you could install Windows and then use something called Hyper-V, which is kind of a way where you can have a, on-the-fly version of, let's say, of Linux come up underneath Windows. Personally, I don't think it works quite as well. There's other things like that. There's one called VirtualBox from Oracle, which is, also a freebie. You can try that one. I like Proxmox because I've been able to get a lot out of a machine when I'm using it in terms of virtual machines. Those virtual machines could then use Docker to run containers. Containers are basically almost like mini, versions of VMs within a VM. So all the stuff that's needed, let's say, to run, SQL Server is all within that one container, or all the things that are needed to run Jellyfin are in that one container. So that's worked well. I even have on my network my NAS, which all the memory on that NAS is only 6 gig, and I'm able to run quite a bit under a virtual machine running on top of the normal NAS software. This is under Synology. So there's some options there. Now, when it comes to storage, this is kind of a tough one, because you got the old mechanicals, and these, I'm sure, probably still going up on price just like everything else, but I think you're still going to be able to find mechanicals a lot cheaper than you are your SSDs. Yes, they're slower, they're older. I don't know, reliability, they're still pretty good. What you may want to think about is maybe get something like a small in capacity, 2230. Use that for your main boot drive, main OS, and then use the mechanical as where you're storing all your data, maybe your programs, but primarily your data could be kept on your mechanical. The other option could be is you boot up, run all your main OS stuff, all your apps on here, but then all your data is on your NAS, your network attached storage. So that way then if you go to another machine, you can still access those same files. You can then do things, maybe some backups with it, so that way then you're not having to have, two things in here, spend the money more on here, kind of utilize what you can with what you've got. What you could do is buy a bunch of these or find a bunch of these, maybe from old machines and such, make your own NAS. I've got some videos that show how to set that up. And the nice thing with that is in the video, the NAS is running again under Proxmox. And so that same Proxmox could also be used to host other virtual machines. So you could do that. I kind of show these just as, reminders of what it was when you could get these, relatively cheap. You could still probably find these used, but, and also maybe low capacity M.2s, but try to look for some of the oddball sizes. Maybe the 2260s and the 2242s and things like that. And then there's always adapters that will allow it to fit the 2280 size. You have to be kind of a little, creative on these. Be a little careful though with off brands of SSDs, M.2s, memory. There's a reason why they're cheaper, and that could be that they don't last as long, maybe the quality control. So buyer beware on those. Test them out. If there are certain brands that are cheaper that you think are worth it, let me know in the comments. Now, when it comes to where to find memory or where to find drives, gonna have to be a little creative. What you may want to start looking for is, hey, look around the house. I have friends, family, old laptops. Great source of memory and drives. Maybe mechanical, maybe SSD, and maybe you're doing them a favor. Hey, I've had this thing laying around and I just, I didn't have time to take it to the e-waste center. You take it off of them, you pull the stuff out of them. Maybe there's a Wi-Fi card you could use. Probably the other components probably aren't something that you could reuse in your EliteDesk or ProDesk, but it is a good source. Now, be careful when it comes to laptops, because some of the real cheap ones have soldered in memory and you're not going to be able to take them out. Occasionally, I had one that my wife was using. It was not soldered in, but you had to take the whole thing apart because literally they stuck the RAM underneath the motherboard. I finally got to it, and I think it was a single stick of 4 gig. So you may want to do that. You may want to look at thrift stores that have perhaps very cheap old laptops as a source. Look on eBay for old laptops. Again, make sure and look to see, number one, does the listing say that the memory's there? And if it doesn't go too specific, ask. Make sure that they didn't go in and take the stuff out of it. Now, when you're looking for stuff on eBay, you may want to look at sellers that don't traditionally sell electronics. So, I don't know, maybe someone that does a lot of estate sales. So they've got lamps and they've got, porcelain figurines. And, oh, by the way, I've got this blah, 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 mini PC or so forth. They may not be as interested in maybe harvesting out the drives and the memory and selling them separate. So you may be able to get in on something. One other thing when buying memory, you may want to see if you can get multiple, like say a lot, from the seller. Maybe you can get 2 at a time, 4 at a time, whatever it might be. Save yourself a little bit on the shipping. If they're willing to barter, maybe, if you're buying 4 sticks from them, maybe you pay them the equivalent of 3 sticks. Other place to look is thin clients. Those do have memory, and assuming they haven't been pulled out, and I've picked up thin clients that had, I'm pretty sure at one time, at least 8 gig, maybe 16 gig in there. So that is a potential source. You could look at maybe G2s, because those were the first to have the DDR4. Maybe able to find one that has at least, hopefully, 8 gig in it, and again, hopefully 2 sticks. And then that way you could use that as a way. Trying not to go with the idea of buying one type of machine and shucking it to pull out the stuff and then just throwing it away. That's, it kind of goes against what we're trying to do here on the channel, is to reuse hand-me-down or old tech. But if it's something where, at least at the time, you could pull that stuff out, get at least one machine working, and a machine that you actually are going to use, you could always save that other thing for parts. Maybe later when you, stumble upon some other memory, you could stick it into there. So hopefully this will give you some ideas on how to get through all this. And as I'm just really concerned about folks starting to get into the mini PCs and going, wow, these are great, but wow, I've got to buy all this memory and all this stuff for it, and it's going to cost me, I don't know, maybe more than just getting a new unit. Well, so you're getting a high-end corporate, high-end user unit for about 1/10 of the price. Yes, it's much better if the RAM and the storage is there. But even before all of this, a lot of units were being sold that way too. But you're going to see more and more where there's going to be a premium on when they do have the memory. But keep an eye out. Maybe the ones with memory are, it's worth it to get them in there, because if you bought them separate, they're going to cost more. Hopefully, this will give you some ideas. Hopefully, you can find that memory and be able to use your units.